Welcome to Midnight Horror YouTube channel. Here, we'll explore thrilling and suspenseful horror stories together. I'll be your guide through the most chilling and captivating experiences. From real-life horror stories to deadly games, Midnight Horror will bring you unforgettable moments of suspense every week. If you're a fan of thrills, haunted castles, and mysteries beyond the ordinary world, subscribe and join me on this terrifying journey. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you won't miss any new videos from Midnight Horror. Get ready for nightmares at Midnight Horror. Let's embark on this terrifying journey together. Thank you for being here with me. Let's get to today's story right now.
My wife Jana and I had been happily married for about a year. We were a young, vibrant couple deeply in love. Our relationship was built on a foundation of mutual respect, trust, and boundless affection. We reveled in each other's company, laughing and adventuring through life side by side. However, in the past several months, Jana had begun exhibiting some very peculiar behaviors, specifically every single morning. At first, I didn't think much of it. I assumed these were just normal fluctuations in Jana's moods, or the occasional night terror that many people experience from time to time. As her husband, I tried my best to be patient, comforting, and understanding whenever she would wake up in a flustered state. But the incidents quickly escalated beyond anything I could have anticipated. Rather than the occasional bad dream, Jana began having these full-blown episodes every single morning without fail. I would wake up to the sound of her moaning and thrashing around on the bed, her eyes wide open but clearly not lucid. She would let out blood-curdling screams that sent chills down my spine. Jana's body would contort into strange, unnatural positions as she writhed around, her limbs flailing about. I was horrified and utterly bewildered. I had no idea what was causing this, and my attempts to calm and soothe her seemed to have no effect whatsoever. Jana was completely consumed by whatever dark forces were overtaking her during these episodes. I would hold her, stroke her hair, and whisper loving words, but she was trapped in her own personal hell, unreachable. As the weeks went by, the incidents only grew worse. Jana's morning episodes became more frequent and more violent. Sometimes they would last for over an hour, with her thrashing about and shrieking like a rabid animal. I watched helplessly, my heart pounding in my chest, as the woman I loved more than anything was taken over by some unseen demon. I took Jana to see doctor after doctor, desperate for answers. But the medical professionals were as stumped as I was. They ran every test imaginable, scanned her brain, took blood samples, yet they could find absolutely nothing physically wrong with her. The only explanation they could offer was the possibility of some kind of psychological or psychiatric issue. Have you considered the possibility of supernatural causes? One particularly bold doctor asked me in a hushed tone. I was taken aback by the suggestion. Supernatural causes? Was he implying that my wife was possessed or haunted by some evil spirit? The very idea was preposterous. I was a rational modern man. I didn't put any stock in old superstitions or the occult. And yet, as I continued to witness Jana's torment morning after morning, I couldn't help but wonder if there might be more to this than meets the eye. I tried desperately to find a logical, scientific explanation. Maybe it was a rare neurological disorder, or some kind of severe anxiety or sleep disorder. I scoured medical journals and forums, but nothing seemed to fit Jana's symptoms. I even considered the possibility of her being drugged or poisoned, though I couldn't fathom who would do such a thing or why. The emotional toll of watching Jana suffer like this was immense. I felt so helpless, so powerless to ease her pain. My heart broke every time I saw the terror in her eyes as she became consumed by whatever dark forces had taken hold of her. I loved Jana more than anything, and the thought of her being tormented by some malevolent entity was almost too much for me to bear. Finally, after months of fruitless searching for answers, I made the difficult decision to reach out to someone who might be able to help. A spiritual advisor of sorts. It was the last thing I ever thought I'd do, but I was running out of options. The traditional medical establishment had failed me, and I was desperate to find a way to save my wife from whatever unseen forces were tormenting her. I spent hours scouring the internet and making discreet inquiries, eventually connecting with a woman who claimed to be an expert in the paranormal and the occult. Her name was Amara, and she had a reputation for helping people who were dealing with demonic possession or supernatural hauntings. When I first spoke to Amara on the phone, I'll admit I was highly skeptical. I peppered her with questions, probing for any sign that she was a quack or a fraud. But the more we talked, the more I began to sense a genuine sincerity and authority in her words. She listened intently as I described Jana's episodes in vivid detail, and her responses were measured and thoughtful. Based on what you've told me, it does sound like your wife may be the victim of a demonic possession, Amara said calmly. These types of afflictions are far more common than most people realize, but you mustn't lose hope. There are ways to expel these dark forces and restore your wife's soul to its rightful state. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. Demonic possession? The idea was so fantastical, so at odds with my rational scientific worldview. And yet, the more I thought about it, the more it seemed to fit the bizarre, inexplicable nature of Jana's condition. What other explanation could there be for her sudden violent transformations, her inhuman contortions, her guttural screams, her complete disconnection from reality during those episodes? Amara could sense my skepticism, and she was quick to reassure me. I know this is difficult to accept, especially for a man of science like yourself, she said. But I can assure you that the supernatural world is very real, and demonic forces are constantly at work, trying to prey on the vulnerable. Your wife is in grave danger and time is of the essence. She went on to explain that the only way to save Jana was to perform a thorough exorcism, a ritual cleansing of the dark entity that had latched onto her. Amara claimed to have extensive experience in this area, having helped countless individuals who had fallen victim to demonic possession. She promised that if I allowed her to perform the ritual, she could free Jana from the malevolent spirit that was tormenting her. I was torn. Every fiber of my being rebelled against the idea of resorting to some kind of occult ritual. It felt like a betrayal of my rational, scientific principles. And yet, as I continued to witness Jana's suffering, I knew I had to try something, anything, to save her. I couldn't stand by and watch the woman I loved be destroyed by forces beyond my understanding. After much agonizing deliberation, I finally agreed to let Amara come to our home and perform the exorcism. I wanted to be skeptical, to maintain a healthy dose of doubt. But as I watched her meticulously prepare the ritual space, lighting candles and arranging various arcane objects, I couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. There was a palpable intensity to Amara's actions, a focus and determination that was deeply unsettling. When the time came for the ritual to begin, I steeled myself for what was to come. Amara instructed me to hold Jana firmly, to restrain her if necessary, as the demonic entity was sure to put up a fierce resistance. I nodded solemnly, my heart pounding in my chest, as Amara began chanting in a language I didn't recognize. The transformation in Jana was immediate and horrifying. As soon as Amara began the ritual, Jana's body convulsed violently, her eyes rolling back in her head. She let out a guttural, inhuman roar that sent chills down my spine. I held her tightly, my muscles straining, as she thrashed and writhed in my grasp. Amara continued her incantation, her voice rising and falling in a mesmerizing, rhythmic cadence. I watched in a mix of awe and terror as Jana's features seemed to shift and morph, her face contorting into an expression of pure malevolence. It was as if some dark, malevolent force was clawing its way to the surface, fighting desperately to maintain its grip on her. The battle raged on for what felt like an eternity. Jana's screams echoed through the house, her body bucking and twisting as Amara pressed on with the ritual. I felt utterly helpless, my heart breaking as I witnessed the woman I loved being consumed by this unseen evil. And then, suddenly, everything went silent. Jana's body went limp in my arms, and the air in the room seemed to shift, the tension dissipating. Amara's chanting tapered off, and she looked at me with a grave yet relieved expression. "It is done," she said solemnly. "The demon has been cast out." I stared at her, dumbfounded, hardly daring to believe what I had just witnessed. Had it really worked? Had Amara truly banished the dark forces that had been tormenting Jana? Gently, I laid Jana down on the bed, my eyes searching her face for any sign of change. To my amazement, the wild, haunted look was gone, replaced by a peaceful, serene expression. Her breathing had slowed, and her body was completely still, no longer writhing and convulsing. I looked up at Amara, my voice trembling. Is she going to be okay?" Amara nodded slowly. Yes, she should be. The exorcism was successful in expelling the demonic entity that had taken hold of her. But I must warn you, this is only the beginning. The forces of darkness will not give up their prey so easily. You and Jana must remain vigilant, for the battle is far from over. I felt a cold chill run down my spine at her words. The battle was far from over. What did that mean? Was Jana still in danger, even after the exorcism? A million questions swirled in my mind, but I knew I had to focus on the here and now, on ensuring Jana's safety and well-being. As Jana stirred and opened her eyes, I rushed to her side, enveloping her in a tight embrace. She looked at me bewildered, and I could see the fear and confusion in her gaze. "Yawned? What happened?" she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Shh, it's okay, my love," I murmured, stroking her hair. "You're safe now. You're going to be okay." I prayed with every fiber of my being that those words were true. Because if Amara was right, and the battle had only just begun, then I knew that the true test of our love and our strength was yet to come. Jana and I had been enjoying a peaceful period after our previous challenges, but that tranquility was soon disrupted. We received the joyous news that Jana was pregnant, but with that excitement came a renewed sense of unease. The early stages of Jana's pregnancy proceeded relatively smoothly at first. She seemed healthy, and the doctor reassured us that everything was progressing normally. However, as the weeks went on, Jana began exhibiting some concerning behaviors once again. At night, Jana would become increasingly restless and agitated. She would toss and turn, muttering under her breath. Sometimes she would sit up suddenly, eyes wide open but with a vacant stare. When I tried to comfort her or ask what was wrong, she would lash out, almost as if she didn't recognize me. I tried to stay patient and understanding, reminding myself that the hormonal changes of pregnancy could be disruptive, but the intensity and frequency of these episodes started to grow. Jana's mood swings became more extreme. One moment she would be happy and affectionate, the next she would be consumed by irrational fears and anger. There were times when she would accuse me of plotting against her or the baby. She would become convinced that I was trying to harm them, even though I had done nothing but love and support her throughout the pregnancy. The accusations and paranoia were deeply distressing, both for me and for Jana herself, when she was lucid enough to realize what she had said. I did my best to be a calming presence, reassuring her and trying to get her to open up about what was troubling her. But Jana seemed increasingly withdrawn, retreating into her own dark thoughts and refusing to confide in me. It was as if a wall had gone up between us, one that I struggled to break through. The situation came to a head one night when Jana became completely inconsolable. She was pacing the bedroom, muttering frantically and clawing at her skin as if trying to tear something off. When I approached her, she let out a blood-curdling scream and shoved me away with surprising force. I was shaken, both by her reaction and the growing sense of dread that was building inside me. What was happening to my beloved Jana? This wasn't the woman I knew and loved. I realized then that I needed to seek professional help, for both Jana's sake and my own. The next day, I made an emergency appointment with Jana's obstetrician. I explained everything that had been happening, my concerns about Jana's mental state, and my fear for the well-being of both her and the baby. The doctor listened intently, then suggested we schedule an immediate psychiatric evaluation. Jana was resistant at first, but I insisted that it was necessary for her health and the health of our unborn child. After much persuasion, she reluctantly agreed to the evaluation. The psychiatrist spent several hours assessing Jana, running various tests and asking probing questions. When the evaluation was complete, the psychiatrist pulled me aside with a grave expression. She explained that Jana was exhibiting symptoms of a rare and severe condition called postpartum psychosis. This disorder, she told me, was characterized by delusions, hallucinations, and dramatic mood swings, exactly the kinds of behaviors Jana had been displaying. The doctor went on to say that postpartum psychosis was a medical emergency that required immediate treatment. Left unchecked, it could have devastating consequences for both the mother and the child. She strongly recommended that Jana be admitted to the psychiatric ward of the hospital for intensive monitoring and care. I was devastated to hear this news. How could this be happening to us, just when we were supposed to be reveling in the joy of our pregnancy? But I knew I had to act quickly to get Jana the help she needed. With a heavy heart, I convinced her to agree to the hospital admission. The first few days were agonizing. Jana was confused and frightened, lashing out at the medical staff and at me when I visited. She refused to eat or sleep, tormented by the hallucinations and delusions that plagued her. I could see the light in her eyes slowly fading, replaced by a hollow, haunted expression. The doctors assured me that this was common for patients in the grips of postpartum psychosis, and that with intensive treatment, Jana had a good chance of recovery. Still, watching her suffer so deeply was excruciating. I spent hours by her bedside, holding her hand and whispering words of love and comfort, even when she seemed unable to hear me. Slowly, with the help of medication and around-the-clock care, Jana began to stabilize. The delusions and hallucinations gradually subsided, and she became more lucid and responsive. But the emotional toll was immense, and she was left feeling ashamed, guilty, and deeply traumatized by her experience. I did my best to reassure Jana, to make her understand that this was not her fault and that I was there for her no matter what. But the scars, both physical and psychological, were deep. She was racked with fear about the well-being of the baby, convinced that she had somehow harmed or endangered our child. The doctors assured us that the baby was unharmed, and that with continued treatment and support, Jana's condition would continue to improve. But the anxiety and self-doubt lingered. Jana became increasingly withdrawn, reluctant to engage with the outside world, or even with me, her closest confidant. I knew I had to be patient and understanding, to give Jana the time and space she needed to heal. But it was so difficult, watching the woman I loved retreat further and further into herself. I felt helpless, unable to truly reach her or ease her suffering. As the weeks passed, Jana's physical health did begin to improve, and the doctors were cautiously optimistic about her prognosis. But the emotional scars ran deep, and I could see the toll it was taking on her mental well-being. She would often wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat and trembling with fear. Sometimes she would be convinced that the baby was in mortal danger, despite all evidence to the contrary. Other times, she would sink into deep bouts of depression, unable to summon the energy or motivation to do even the simplest tasks. I tried to be the rock she could cling to, providing a steady, reassuring presence in the midst of her turmoil. I arranged for additional therapy and support, hoping that with time and care, Jana would be able to find her way back to the vibrant, joyful woman I had fallen in love with. But as the due date approached, Jana's anxiety and fear only seemed to intensify. She became convinced that something terrible was going to happen, that she was going to fail as a mother, or that the baby would be harmed. No matter how much I tried to reassure her, to remind her of all the progress she had made, the darkness would always creep back in. The delivery itself was a harrowing experience. Jana was a mess of nerves, trembling and weeping as the contractions intensified. She begged me not to leave her side, clinging to my hand with a vice-like grip. I did my best to coach her through the pain and fear, whispering words of encouragement and love. When our beautiful baby girl finally arrived, healthy and strong, I expected to see Jana's face light up with joy. But instead I watched in horror as she recoiled from the tiny bundle, eyes wide with terror. She refused to hold the baby, insisting that she was unfit to be a mother, that she would only bring harm to our child. The medical staff tried to intervene, to gently coax Jana into bonding with the baby, but she would have none of it. She retreated further into herself, curling up in a ball on the hospital bed, and refusing all attempts at comfort or reassurance. I was devastated, torn between the elation of finally meeting our daughter and the anguish of seeing Jana so utterly consumed by fear and self-loathing. I knew then that we had a long and difficult road ahead of us, one that would require immense patience, love, and support. In the days that followed, Jana's condition only seemed to deteriorate. She would barely acknowledge the baby, avoiding eye contact and refusing to hold or feed her. The doctors expressed grave concern, warning me that Jana's refusal to bond with the child could have serious long-term consequences. I tried to be the bridge between Jana and our daughter, gently encouraging her to engage, to at least hold the baby for a few moments. But every attempt was met with hysterical resistance, Jana's terror and self-loathing overwhelming any maternal instinct. As the weeks passed, I found myself torn between caring for our newborn and trying to coax Jana out of her downward spiral. It was an exhausting, emotionally draining balancing act, and I often found myself on the verge of collapse, unsure of how much longer I could keep going. I reached out to Jana's family, pleading for their support and understanding. They rallied around us, offering to assist with the baby and providing a much-needed respite for me. But their presence only seemed to further unsettle Jana, who became increasingly withdrawn and suspicious of their intentions. The doctors recommended that Jana be readmitted to the psychiatric ward, this time with our daughter accompanying her. The idea of separating the baby from Jana was heartbreaking, but the medical team insisted it was the best chance of facilitating a strong mother-child bond and preventing further deterioration of Jana's mental health. With a heavy heart, Jana fought the decision every step of the way, her terror and anguish palpable. But I knew it was the only way forward, the only chance we had of reclaiming the vibrant, loving woman I had fallen in love with. The first few weeks of the inpatient treatment were grueling. Jana was resistant to all attempts at therapy and bonding exercises, her distrust and self-loathing a formidable barrier. There were times when I truly feared that she would never recover, that the trauma of the postpartum psychosis had broken her beyond repair. But the medical team was persistent, employing a combination of medication, counseling, and carefully structured bonding activities. Slowly, ever so slowly, I began to see glimmers of the old Jana peeking through the darkness. She would engage tentatively with the baby, her touch gentle and her gaze softening. It was a painstaking process, with many setbacks and moments of utter despair. But I refused to give up, to let Jana slip away from me. I spent countless hours by her side, offering unwavering support and gentle encouragement. I knew that if I could just reach her, if I could help her find her way back to herself, we could overcome this challenge and emerge stronger than ever. And one day, after what felt like an eternity, a breakthrough occurred. Jana was holding our daughter, rocking her gently, and I saw a spark of recognition, of pure, unadulterated love, flared a life in her eyes. She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face, and in that moment, I knew that the woman I loved was still there, buried beneath the layers of trauma and fear. From that point on, the progress was steady, if still fragile. Jana continued to work diligently in her therapy sessions, confronting her deepest fears and insecurities. She slowly began to rebuild her confidence as a mother, taking pride in the milestones our daughter reached and reveling in the simple joys of caretaking. It was not an easy road, and there were plenty of setbacks and moments of doubt. But with the unwavering support of the medical team, my own steadfast presence, and Jana's own determination, she steadily regained her footing. The light in her eyes grew brighter, the smile on her face more genuine and frequent. As the months passed, Jana's bond with our daughter blossomed and deepened. I marveled at the transformation, at the way Jana's maternal instincts seemed to blossom and thrive, overcoming the dark shadows that had once consumed her. Our little family was healing, growing stronger with each passing day. There were still moments of lingering fear and anxiety, times when Jana would become overwhelmed and retreat inward. But I learned to be patient, to offer her the space and support she needed to work through those emotions. And with each hurdle we overcame, Jana's confidence and resilience only seemed to grow. Looking back on those dark days, I am filled with a profound sense of gratitude and admiration for Jana's strength and courage. She had faced a formidable challenge, one that threatened to shatter both her and our family. But she had fought her way through, emerging from the depths of despair with a renewed appreciation for life and a deep, abiding love for our daughter. As we settled into our new normal, I marveled at the depth of Jana's transformation. She was radiant, glowing with a newfound inner peace and joy. And our daughter, in turn, blossomed under her mother's loving care, thriving in the warmth and security of our little family. I knew that the road ahead would still have its challenges, that the specter of Jana's postpartum psychosis might linger, casting an occasional shadow over our lives. But I also knew that we had weathered the storm, emerging stronger and more resilient than ever before. With Jana by my side and our beautiful daughter to cherish, I felt a deep sense of gratitude and hope. We had been through the unimaginable, and yet we had found our way back to each other, our bond forged in the crucible of adversity. And as we looked toward the future, I knew that whatever lay ahead, we would face it together, united in our love and our unwavering commitment to each other and to our family.
I would like to extend my sincere thanks to all of you for taking the time to watch our video on Midnight Horror. We truly appreciate your interest and support. We're eager to hear your feedback on the video. Your thoughts are a great motivation for us to improve and deliver even better content. If you found the video enjoyable and worth sharing, please consider liking and subscribing to stay updated with our latest releases. Your support will help us continue creating content that you love. Once again, thank you all so much for supporting Midnight Horror. Wishing you all a wonderful day.